Hello there. This is Luciano Oliveira, Brazilian attorney. We are here back to our live stream. Today is Wednesday, January the 3rd. That's our first live stream of the year. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's Eve and you are on track for a very successful 2024. And let's get started. So, as usual, we're going to have a main theme that I'm going to discuss. And today's theme is going to be the digital nomad visa. And, you know, any people participating in the live stream should feel free to suggest topics. Live participants are going to have a priority. So if you have a topic of your interest, we're going to discuss this topic. If we have no topics coming from participants, then I'm going to address some of the offline topics that we receive over time. All right. So it looks like we already have a participant over here, Prince Philip. Welcome, Prince Philip. Bom dia. I have some questions, por favor. My RNE visa based on marriage expires October 24th, but divorce finalized a few years ago. I still visit Brazil at least twice a year. When I was married, I did try to naturalize, but it was when government changed and Portuguese test was mandatory and it was too late to include the test, so denied, right? You do the CELP-BRAS in April. I wanted to ask, will I be able to renew, extend my current RNE, even if I am now divorced? Is it still possible to apply for citizenship in my current position with RNE expiring in October? So usually when you marry a Brazilian and you apply for residency, you're going to get the permanent residency. And nowadays, Brazil doesn't use the word permanente, which would be the Portuguese translation for permanent. They use like indeterminado, which would be better translated as undetermined, right, or undefined. And the idea behind this kind of language is to avoid saying that you have something that's permanent, so they can take it away if they find a basis for, taking away your residency, for instance, like something that is like considered as a serious crime in Brazil, and so on. So if your RNE, which nowadays it's called RNEMA, right? RNE, it was the registration for foreign citizens in Brazil, Registro Nacional de Estrangeiros, right? Foreign citizen registration. Nowadays it's RNEMA, right? Registro Nacional Migratório, or registration of national migration. But the concept is pretty much the same. It's what we call the Brazilian green card, which is like a residency card. So from a technical perspective, right? Like, I mean, we don't have all the information required to give you a definite answer, unfortunately. But I would say, from a technical perspective, you don't have the permanent residency, because if you had your RNEMA, right, it would show no expiration date. And yours, it does show an expiration date. So unfortunately, it is pretty possible that the Brazilian authority is going to ask you for qualifying for the permanent residency. And if they do ask you for such proof, you're not going to be able to provide it because you are no longer married, right? This said, from the Brazilian immigration in general is not super consistent. So it may also happen that you're going to show up and they're just going to rubber stamp your application for a renewal of your residency card, particularly if the underlying reason was a marriage, like, because again, marriage usually is going to give you a permanent residency, or the indeterminado, which means like no limit in time. So I would tell you, to just go ahead and apply, and there is still a good chance that they're going to renew your residency card. Okay, there are the possibility of applying that you could, if you don't get the renewal, like you could retain an attorney, right, to present the legal basis for, like a justification for you to get the renewal. But at this point, particularly if you're not being represented by an attorney, I think that the answer is, try to get it. If you don't get it, you can consider retaining an attorney to file a request for reconsideration, right? Kind of, that's what we call like the appeal process from an immigration perspective. And then you could probably provide the justification for the renewal through attorney. Okay, Prince Philip, but like the lowest hanging fruit is for you to basically just, show up and try to renew as it was your right, okay, and take from there. Terry Roswell, great YouTube channel, Luciano. Thank you very much, Terry. These are very educational. I'm watching from New Zealand, and I have a question about the digital nomad visa. Interesting. That's today's theme, Terry. So, right timing. The list of required documentation contains work contract and proof of regular income of minimum 1,500 US dollars per month or 18,000 US dollars of bank funds available, right? Have the 18,000 US dollars of bank funds. Do you still require the work contract? Terry, that's a recurring question, and the answer is yes. Okay, you do need something showing that you have an activity. Right now, we're going to discuss about the work contract requirement, and in reality, it doesn't need to be a traditional work contract. There is several ways for you to present acceptable paperwork. But the short answer is yes. The 18,000 is not enough to secure the visa. From a just to provide some basis for the answer. The idea is that if they don't ask you for any type of activity that is not a digital nomad visa, that would be the $18,000 visa, right? It means like there is no connection to digital nomad. It just means that whoever has 18,000 US dollars in the bank, they could just get a visa. So this would not be a digital nomad visa. That would be the 18,000 balance visa, right? So that's not the purpose of the Brazilian government. The idea behind the digital nomad visa is that you're going to be getting money from abroad. You're going to be in Brazil working for someone abroad. It cannot be like a Brazilian party, a Brazilian employer, a Brazilian client, a Brazilian whatever you would be providing some type of services to. You got to be someone abroad. So the Brazilian government, again, they want to see a string of income. Okay, the 18,000, it is therefore a single purpose. 1,500 a month is pretty easy for any U.S. citizen, for instance, to receive. It could be in employment, it could be through like freelance, it could be from gigs, right? Whatever you do in the U.S., you're going to get more than 1,500. So a U.S. citizen, like in general, like is not going to have any issues doing something that's going to get 1,500 a month. Now think about someone coming from Africa, right, or the Middle East, right, or let's say Eastern Europe, right? It changes dramatically. Like the 1,500 becomes like a barrier, okay, and Brazil has this tradition of trying to look after, developing country citizens. So the idea of the 18,000 is to provide a plan B for people working in countries where they are not going to be able to show 1,500 income. That's the whole purpose of the 18. But it was never the Brazil government intention to say, listen, if you have 18,000 in the bank, you get the digital nomad visa. All right. That's pretty steady interpretation, like across different immigration law firms. And never actually tried, but to file an application without additional paperwork, like showing some type of activity. But I think it's a given that if you just apply without anything, supporting some type of work or business relationship, you're gonna be denied. Okay, that's pretty settled. And although we never filed an application without some, work supporting documents, we did have more than once requests from the immigration asking for additional documents showing that this person was actually engaged in some type of activity. Okay, that's the answer right there, Terry. Prince Philip, thank you so much, Luciano. You're very welcome. So let me see, any more questions? So far, so good. So we're gonna go back to the digital nomad visa and building up on our answer to Terry. I would say maybe the next question would be, all right, so what can I provide as a work contract? Let's say if you are in between jobs, right? Like you don't have a job position right now, and maybe that's the whole point of going to Brazil, so you can, enjoy yourself a little bit. So it is pretty easy for someone to actually achieve the so-called work contract. And although the language work contract is actually in the Brazilian regulation for the digital nomad, we know that the government is going to accept pretty much anything that's reasonable. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I don't have any job as of today. Okay, I could set up an account with Upwork, and using Upwork, I could, if I am like, I don't know, like a designer, or if I am, an engineer, or if I am an SEO expert. And nowadays, Upwork has literally hundreds of activities that people could provide for a fee. And Upwork, of course, they are going to provide you with an agreement. And the agreement is that you're going to work as a freelancer. You're not an employee of Upwork, but you're working for a fee. Upwork is going to collect payments from the Upwork clients who are going to be hiring your work, and you're going to be paid by Upwork, right? So right there, it's a pretty easy way of getting paperwork that's going to show some type of paid activity, okay? And then even if you're making like literally like 500 US dollars a month because you just started with Upwork, so maybe you just got a couple of jobs for the entire month. If you're making $500 a month, then the 18,000 is going to come, to help you meet the requirement from a financial perspective. And the fact that you have the paperwork with Upwork should be enough, right? And then there is a matter of how you're going to present these documents, and that's why ideally you would have like a law firm supporting you, because we know how to present these documents in a way that's going to have the highest chance of approval by the Brazilian immigration. But again, the point here is that even if you have no work at all, you could very easily, in a month or two, get the paperwork required to put you in a position to secure the digital nomad visa. And that's why the 18,000, like if you have this 18,000 in a savings account, like that would be pretty helpful if you are just getting started with Upwork, for instance. Okay. Well, as you probably know, there is something new happening next week. The waiver, the visa waiver applicable to U.S. citizens, Canadian citizens, and Australian citizens is going to be, right? So starting next week on January the 10th, you're gonna need visa to visit Brazil. So we're talking about our next Wednesday live stream. So next week, when we have the same live stream, U.S. citizens, Canadian citizens, and Australians, they are going to be required a visa to enter Brazil. Okay, that's a gift from the President Lula administration. Not like a super fan of the U.S. Okay, so there you go. And but the good thing is, like, I mean, it's mostly like retribution, or I mean reciprocity. Okay, so the idea behind the government approach to visas is that if a country is requiring Brazilians to present a visa, Brazil is also requiring a visa for the citizens of this country, right? And as the U.S., of course, requires visa from Brazilian citizens, now Brazil, under President Lula, interprets that U.S. citizens should also have a visa to visit Brazil. Now, the good news is that it's mostly, from a financial perspective, and again, like the reciprocity concept, like that's an international concept between countries, and you can actually ask for this visa online. It's super easy. Okay, you basically need to provide a bank statement showing that you have funds. You're gonna upload your passport and a few other documents, and you're gonna pay a fee. I think it's $82, right? I don't know why 82, but that's what they are charging, and you could probably complete this visa application in half an hour, right? Some people, they are very busy. They are gonna hire us to apply for the visa, and that's okay. We understand that people are busy. They wanna get it done right at the first time. And if that's your case, you can reach out to us, info@oliveiralawyers.com. We give you the quote. We get you on board, and we can apply on your behalf, right? But again, it's a half an hour process. You basically pay the $82 fee, and you get the visa. Okay, pretty easy. Now, the connection between the visa requirement and the digital nomad visa is that like when you get the traditional visa, or even before the visa, there was the waiver, and they work in a similar way. You basically get 90 days from the day when you arrive in Brazil. Okay, it's not from when you get the visa. So, let's say if you apply for the visa today, right? You could just go use the link for the e-visa from the Brazilian government, and you're gonna get a visa in a few days. It doesn't mean that your clock is starting to tick. It just means you got the visa. But the 90 days is going to start to count from the day when you enter Brazil. So you enter Brazil, 90 days it starts to count, and there is still the possibility of applying for a 90-day extension. However, within the scope of this new administration, they are making more difficult for people to get the extension. Okay, so with the prior administration, the orientation for the Brazilian immigration was to basically rubber stamp whatever it was being asked in terms of extension. So people would show up, like if you're in Rio de Janeiro, you go to the Santos Dumont Airport, Polícia Federal. If you're in São Paulo, traditionally you go to the Polícia Federal in Lapa, right? And you basically say, I need an extension. You pay a fee. You need to schedule an appointment. You show up. You say extensão de visto, 90 dias. They rubber stamp the thing. This is changing. Okay, this is changing, and we have news from clients who are actually having a hard time, right? So because of this, like history of easy extensions, people are basically showing up at the Polícia Federal and saying, I need an extension. And they say, well, why do you need an extension? Well, because I want to stay for 90 days. And they say, well, that's not how it works. You need a good reason for me to give you the 90 days, right? So foreign citizens are facing this increased interpretation of the 90-day extension as something that's unusual, that's due to extenuating circumstances, and they are no longer rubber stamping the 90 days, right? So I think that because of that, people should basically rethink until last year, whenever we would have a consultation with a client related to immigration, they would basically consider right off the bat, well, I have 180 days to stay in Brazil, okay? I think this kind of interpretation is changing as we speak. So you get the 90 days, and maybe you're going to get an additional 90 days. Maybe you get it, maybe you're not, you don't get it, right? So that's an important change that's coming along with the visa requirement, right? The extension, the 90-day extension is becoming more difficult to achieve, and there is a possibility that you're not going to get the extension. And for this reason, the digital nomad visa is becoming more and more popular because it does give you a 1 year stay right off the bat. And once your 1 year expires, you have a second year, right? You have a second year of digital nomad visa. There is a possibility that the government is going to allow for a third year. We don't have a consistent information so far on that. So is still a possibility that you could even have like a multiple renewals under the digital nomad visa route or not. So we don't know yet, but it's guaranteed that you're going to have 2 years. Of course, as long as you qualify, right? You meet the requirements. So that's a really good visa. I think with low requirements, they don't give you a hard time. Usually, traditionally, they are pretty friendly when they review the documents. I'm going to give you an example. Like they do ask for criminal records, but most of our applications, they don't have like FBI records. Like we make it work with lesser criminal records, for instance, from the municipalities or states, and the immigration is still going to accept it. Okay. Now, if you're working with, for instance, the marriage-based residency, they would never accept for U.S. citizens anything less than FBI records with an apostille on top of it. So they have a different, levels of interpretation of the requirements depending on the visa. And for the digital nomad visa, by far is the most friendly review that we see in our practice, immigration-wise. All right. Terry Roswell, a question about the retirement visa, V10 14. Must the applicant be 65 or over, or can they be any age as long as they have, in fact, stopped working permanently in the manner of a retiree, right? There is no, like, if you look, right, like, and I see you doing your homework, you even know the technical names of the visas, the V10, 14, for instance. And if you read the regulation, there is no language like requiring a minimum age. Okay, so there is no 65 minimum age or anything. The point is that you are retired, right? So as we speak, we have a gentleman from the U.S. Army who's applying with us, and he's like under 40 years old, right? But he's retired, right? Like, I mean, due to his circumstances, he is actually retired, and there is nothing precluding him from getting the retirement visa. So that's, there you go, like less than 40 years old, and this gentleman is retired. And there is nothing holding him from getting the retirement visa, okay? Another thing in your question, if they have in fact stopped working permanently, I don't think Brazil is too crazy about making sure that the person is not working. I don't think Brazil wants to inflict this type of penalty on people. Like today, nowadays, people retire and they still want to have some type of activity. They could teach, they could do research, they could do a bunch of things. And I don't see a reason for Brazil to preclude this person from doing something helpful, particularly for the society. So that's something we don't usually worry here at the firm. You need to be retired, right? And retired means like you get to a point where you don't have like a formal employment anymore, like formal. But if you happen to have like an LLC in the US, if you're doing some consulting on the side, if you are working for a nonprofit, if you're doing volunteer work, there is a bunch of things that in our interpretation you could be doing instead of just stop working, right? Like, I mean, if someone stops working and then doesn't do anything else, I think that that's not healthy. And most people that we take on board for the retirement visa, they have something on the side, and we say that we see zero problem, right? And of course, we're not going to be hammering the immigration with this information, right? Like, listen, we're applying for the retirement visa, but listen, he's doing something on the side, right? I wanted to let you know. So we basically do not address like this something on the side. We're going to present the requirements that we are being told by the immigration, right? Does this person have like a retirement account? I think that's the bottom line, right? Like Brazil wants people who have like a steady flow of income stay in Brazil. Super big deal, right? Like super good deal for Brazil because like all of a sudden this person is spending money in Brazil while being paid, for instance, in the US, right? So super smart Brazil to offer the retirement visa, and that's the whole purpose. Okay, so if you're doing something on the side, I don't think this is gonna you know hurt your application. Yes, follow-up question from Terry. What evidence is needed as a proof of retirement? Would a letter of proof of annuity from a superannuation provider be enough evidence? Would a letter from an employer confirming retirement be enough? We never present a confirmation of retirement, okay, Terry? Because again, it's not in the regulation. We interpret the requirements from the immigration according to the underlying regulation, and there is no language saying that you need to prove that you are retired. The language says the person must have retirement funds enough to support this person in Brazil, and nowadays the minimum is like $2,000 a month. And they also ask you for a proof that you can send the funds to Brazil. So we work strictly with the language from the law, from the underlying regulation. Is not a law passed by Congress. It's a law, like a regulation coming from the administration, federal administration, okay? So, for instance, you're talking about annuity. Annuity is traditionally a type of retirement account. So as long as you're getting over $2,000 from an annuity, right? In our interpretation, you're good to apply for the Brazil retirement visa. Nobody's going to be addressing your age, and nobody is going to be addressing if you stop it working completely. If your employer, is going to tell the Brazilian immigration, yes, he did retire. Like so far, we never had such a request. Okay, with the Brazilian immigration, you never know. Like just as any other immigration, they have a prerogative of changing their requirements. So that could happen, right? Like if they think, oh, people are abusing the retirement visa, now we're going to need to ask some type of proof of retirement. That could happen. That could make sense. But that's not how it works today. Okay, Terry? All right. Can a managed fund portfolio monthly divestment be used as proof of income? Similar to annuity, right? That would be a matter of how the immigration analyst is going to interpret what you're presenting. Okay, annuity, I think it's pretty settled to be a type of a retirement account, right? Everybody knows an annuity, like you're going to pay. It could be like a single payment. It could be like a string of payments, but the whole purpose of the annuity is that eventually you stop investing and you start to withdrawing money over time, ideally. So this fund is going to last for longer, ideally forever, right? Or during your lifetime. That's the whole purpose of an annuity. So annuity is pretty accepted. Now, if you have something, I'm thinking about maybe you're talking about a 401k. And in this 401k, you have the option of do a self-management, like you would get part of the funds from the 401k or the IRA, and then you would, for instance, buy a house. And the rent you're going to get from the house, it's like growing tax-free within the scope of your retirement account, right? So the point is like how the analyst is going to interpret that, right? So I think it's more a matter of the analyst understanding what you're showing and agreeing that we are talking about a retirement fund. When things start to become complicated, chances are, you could have some issues with the immigration. Because there is no list, at least from our understanding, no list about the specific accounts that are acceptable or not. This is going to be usually interpreted by the immigration analyst in charge of your application. So I would advise you to stick to the traditional sources of funds. Number one would, of course, be Social Security. If you have Social Security payments over $2,000, that's a given that you're going to get, as long as you do meet requirements, of course. But once you start to become more creative, of course, the chances of having an issue with the meeting of the retirement account requirement is gonna increase substantially. Okay. All right, Mackenzie Bailey. I overstayed in Brazil for 2019, 2020 for a year. A lady told me I would have to pay a fine, but I never received any document or forms whatsoever. I've tried to contact the embassy to find out the amount. Mackenzie, usually this is like, it's the public administration, right? So they have specific departments, they have specific people in charge of handling fines, of overstay fines. And I would not expect the Brazilian embassy or Brazilian consulate to be able to assist. In their heads, like they probably have more important things to handle than finding out about overstay fines. So this is usually handled by the Polícia Federal, right, the federal police in Brazil. And it's pretty common for people in your case, if you try to fly again into Brazil, they are going to notify you of the amount at the moment that you arrive. They may expect you to pay this fine on the spot to let you in the country, okay? So as a condition of letting you get inside Brazil again, they would ask you to pay the fine. For a whole year of overstay, you are probably going to incur into the maximum fine, which is 10,000 Brazilian reais, which is roughly $2,000. So in your case, if you need a visa, if you are a U.S. citizen, now you're going to need a visa a week from today, right, starting on January the 10th. You need a visa, get a visa. As long as you get a visa, that's a good sign that your name is not in a blacklist, which could be the case as well. But if you get a visa, that's, again, a good sign. You fly into Brazil, but have money, have cash with you. Because if they tell you, listen, you need to pay your fine on the spot, otherwise we're going to send you back home, then you can pay the fine and be on your way to enjoy Brazil. Okay, Mackenzie, I hope that helps. JM, can a Brazilian student visa last for 2 years, like the digital nomad visa? Usually the student visa is going to mimic your studies in Brazil, right? So, for instance, if you're gonna apply for a graduation degree, for a 4 year BA, a bachelor's, like of four years, your visa is actually going to mimic the would have 4 years. Now, if you're going to study, in let's say it could be a post graduation program, like a master's, like a 1 year full time master's in Brazil. That's 1 year, right? So they're not going to give you 2 years. They're going to give you 1 year because this is going to mimic the period of study that you have in Brazil. The same thing with a 4 year bachelor degree or whatever you can think of. Like if it's a 2 year kind of associate degree, then it's 2 years, bachelor's 4 years, and so on. I hope that helps, Jay. Barry Downing, what is the best way to determine whether a property is deemed eligible for residence by property purchase? For example, what is determined urban or rural? Right. So usually the immigration analyst is gonna go by the title, by the deed. Okay. In Portuguese, we call registro. Registro do imóvel. Some people they say registro geral do imóvel. All right. But basically, we're talking about the title, and the title is going to show the specifics for this property, and usually it's going to mention that this property is either paying urban taxes, which is the famous IPTU. Okay, IPTU is the yearly property tax in Brazil. And if the property is paying IPTU, guess what? It's an urban property, right? Because actually IPTU means Imposto Predial Territorial Urbano. Urbano means urban, right? So if you're paying urban taxes, it means the property is urban. And if you're not paying the IPTU, you're going to be paying something called ITR. And ITR is a different tax, and just like the IPTU, it means that you're paying taxes on a rural property, right? So the analyst is going to go by this information. The analyst is not going to think, well, this is like 5,000 people city, and therefore I think it's rural. The immigration analysts, they're never going to do such inquiry. They are going to go by the type of taxes that the property is paying. Okay, so this is easy, for you to determine property is rural or urban, and that's how they are going to assert if the property meets the urban or rural requirement. Just keep in mind that there are probably 10 other requirements. Okay, this is just one of the 10. Another one, for instance, is going to be if it is an already built property, right? Like you cannot buy. That's a super common question we have here. The farmer, the foreigner, the foreign citizen is going to say, "Well, I'm going to buy a plot of land and then I'm going to build myself," right? That doesn't work. That does not qualify. For the real estate investment visa residency, it needs to be either an existing property, and we should go back to the title because in Brazil it's super common for people to have something that was already built. But guess what? The construction was not annotated on the title. So you buy the property, you're all happy that you bought like a qualifying property, but when you apply and the analyst looks at the deed, it says, oh, plot of land. Guess what? You're going to be denied, right? So we now spoke about two requirements, okay? Another requirement is that the minimum for the transaction meets the requirement. Unfortunately, in Brazil, it's super common for people to play games about the selling price. That's very unfortunate. They do that for tax fraud purposes. And believe it or not, some people think it's acceptable, okay? And if you follow that route, guess what? The paperwork for the transaction is going to show a lower amount. And of course, you're going to be denied the visa, right? So we spoke about three things. Here, there is another major component. Unfortunately, in Rio de Janeiro, there is a bank that is selling like a strategy for people to open local bank accounts instead of sending the money to the seller, because this bank makes money by opening these accounts for foreign citizens. They charge a lot of money. But unfortunately, if you send the money to yourself, and then you use this money to buy a property, in theory, you're not following the regulation. The regulation says money should come from abroad for the specific purpose of buying real estate. And this is a technical requirement. That's not a lay interpretation. It means that the money is coming from an account abroad and it's reaching the bank account of the seller, okay? So if you send it to your own account, guess what? This is going to be qualified. Like there's going to be a currency exchange contract. And this currency exchange contract is going to say this is money for availability. And this is not a lay term, that's a technical term. That's how the money is recorded with the Brazilian Central Bank, instead of money to buy real estate, which is going to be the case when you send the money from your account abroad to the seller's account directly. So that's another pretty common mistake. I honestly think it's a horrible idea to buy properties by yourself if you are planning to apply for the residency. Like a permanent residency in Brazil is a big deal. So, don't be cheap, hire a lawyer. It doesn't need to be us, right? That's not a self-serving advice. Hire a lawyer, because otherwise you could waste this whole time. And once you buy a property, it's pretty difficult to sell a property in Brazil. It's much easier to buy, okay? Like I know foreign citizens who bought a property in Brazil, like a 2 million reais property, 3 million reais property, they buy it in like a few months, and when it's time to sell, unless they sell at a deep discount, they are going to have a horrible time to sell the property. So, that means, for you to undo these mistakes, like it could literally take you several years, right? So again, don't be cheap, hire someone to do it right the first time. Okay, Mr. Primate, I want to apply for the digital nomad visa. I was born in Italy, but live in the United States. What would be the process to get an apostille birth certificate mailed to me? Right, Mr. Primate, you are on the right track, okay? You don't need to do the legwork yourself. Apostille services, they are traditionally provided by specializing services, and these services, they are virtually everywhere. So if you were born in Italy, you are correct. The apostille should be handled in Italy, not in the US. And just explaining the underlying reason, the apostille is going to be a document from a public authority vouching for a specific document. So the US would never be able to tell if an Italian birth certificate is legit or not. And therefore, you need to get the apostille in Italy. And I guarantee there is a bunch of apostille service providers in Italy. So you are on the right track. Get this service done by someone over there and ask them to ship, ideally not by postal services. I usually recommend, if you are in the US, it could be like Federal Express, it could be UPS. DHL is common in Europe, but is not common at all in the US. So most probably you would be like FedEx or UPS. I do not recommend postal services, particularly cross borders. It's not rare for these documents to become lost, okay? The Gentle Chief. Welcome, Gentle Chief. If I get a digital nomad visa before I get to Brazil, does it expire a year from when it was issued or a year after I have it touched down? That's a good question. We usually work with the application in Brazil. Okay, we are unable to represent you before a consulate, and this route is going to be through a consulate, right? However, making a parallel to how things work in Brazil, I would say your 1 year is going to start to count when you register with the federal police in Brazil. Registration with the federal police, it's a requirement. So the problem here is like if you get the visa through a consulate, once this visa is issued, as per the Brazilian regulation related to immigration, you have a 30 days to register at the federal police. So although your visa is not going to start to count right away, you do have 30 days to go to Brazil and attend this registration procedure with the federal police. So my recommendation is like if you're planning, to come to Brazil in July or August, that you will not start this process right away. Because again, if you get the visa, there is this expectation that you're going to be attending an interview with the Brazilian Federal Police in 30 days. And the time starts to count usually on the day of the registration. So once you attended this interview, they are going to actually give you a printout. And this printout is going to give you the RNM number, which is like your registration as a foreign citizen in Brazil. And that's when the time starts to count. All right, Mackenzie Bailey, I am a UK citizen, and the person said I could pay when returned, which is this February, but I couldn't get home because of COVID. Thank you for your help. Yes, Mackenzie, listen, if you have any evidence of COVID, you could even present this evidence and try to get a discount on the penalty. Okay, there is a form that you could ask for, which is like the declaration of income. If you have a somewhat limited income, they would reduce your penalty. Okay, that's a standard procedure. That's not something extraordinary. I just recommended that you do not lie, right? If you happen, like you're from the UK, if you happen to have comfortable financials, just pay the fine. Don't lie on the form. But if you, for some reason, doesn't have like such comfortable financials, you could ask for the declaration of income form in order to reduce the roughly $2,000 penalty, right? Like if you stayed for a full year, particularly if you got COVID, if you can show paperwork, Brazilian government would be pretty reasonable in terms of reducing the penalty, I would expect. Right, Barry Downing, I will definitely be calling for a consultation when I'm closer to making the move. I very much appreciate your information and professionalism. My pleasure, Barry. I appreciate your participation. Make sure to join us in future live streams. Your participation is important, to the live stream, right? Like without the participants, this live stream would be boring, would be pretty boring. But you guys make the live streaming more interesting. So thank you for participating. The Gentle Chief, thank you. Thank you for participating, Gentle Chief. Prince Philip, OG, in the case of RNE, RNM, or naturalization, can I hire a lawyer all the process for me? I did it myself last time, and it was too much for me. I agree, Prince Philip, and just touching on the language here. So for those who do not know, you probably know the differences. So RNE is the old version of the RNM. They are exactly the same thing, okay? They mean your registration as a foreign citizen at the federal police in Brazil. And some people, they think, well, it's a benefit because I'm going to get the card, right? It's a highly sought identification card because then you can open bank accounts, you can do a bunch of things that you're not going to be able to do without the card. But in addition to a benefit, is actually an obligation. You need to register with the Brazil Federal Police in 30 days after you secure an immigration benefit such as visa or residency. If you don't do so, they have the prerogative of voiding your visa, right? Sometimes they don't void right away. They wait for a little bit. Maybe you're gonna show up with some pretty good excuse, and they are gonna still give you what you applying for. But if it takes too long, they will avoid your visa or residency. Okay, so RNE, RNM, the very same thing. RNE, Registro Nacional de Estrangeiros, Foreign National Registration. RNEMA, Registro Nacional Migratório, Migration National Registration. They're pretty much the same thing. They are a number in a database, so they are not the card. The card is a physical representation of your registration number. And again, this is pretty important for you to enjoy things in Brazil, such as opening a bank account. And Prince Philip well said, it's a lot for foreign citizens. I like to say, like to joke that, listen, if you have all the time in the world and if you enjoy learning immigration stuff, you could probably be able to do it by yourself, but you're going to spend a ton of time, right? And for some people, time is money, or maybe time is not money, but you could be spending your time on something else. Let's say if you are in a retirement age, I'm sure you have better things to do in life with your time than to learn Brazil immigration. Unless you are a nerd like I am, then you probably enjoy learning about immigration. But if that's not your case, skip on the learning part and just pay someone to do it professionally and right the first time. Okay. Prince Philip, OG, this is a great presentation. I already learned a lot. Thanks again. You're very welcome, Prince Philip. I'm glad you're here with us. Okay, so all right, we're going to talk about digital nomad, another topic that is very interesting from my perspective. Some people, when they have a company, which is common in the US, right? Like you have so many entrepreneurs who want to stay in Brazil, enjoying the low cost of living, enjoying the beauties of the country, and work with their own entity, US or in the UK or elsewhere. They are going to be pretty settled on presenting the company paperwork to the immigration. And we saw that happening multiple times. With us, it happened just once because there was at the beginning of the digital nomad visa offering. We didn't know better, and we did present the company paperwork, and it was a mess, okay? There was no way. We tried to push the immigration to accept because, of course, it does show that the applicant has some work activity, right? It couldn't. I think it's super well supported that if someone has an entity, the entity is making money, this person has a work activity, and this person should be granted the digital nomad visa. But we could not get this applicant approved until we changed our ways, okay? And what we did was basically to convince the applicant to get a work contract between himself and his company, right? And by the way, this is not fraud. I mean, he did own the company, so he had all the rights to hire himself. And basically, he had a work contract he would sign as an employee, and he had the human resources person at his company to sign on behalf of the company. So we changed the approach. The immigration immediately approved the application. Okay. And we need to correct these applicants' understanding over time. Is super common here at the firm. People come and they get upset when we tell them that they should have a work contract between them and their company. They get upset because, like our first client that I was mentioning, he's an attorney, and I'm not disclosing any names, so you cannot tell who he is. I'm not disclosing like private information from anyone. I'm just, illustrating the concept. Like he was, the managing partner. It was his law firm, right? So he thought that getting a work contract It was kind of, he wouldn't reflect his position as the owner of a law firm. And that's why he pushed it for us to work with the company incorporation papers, the bylaws, right? Like the registration with the Secretary of State. And we presented a bunch of papers, and we couldn't make it this thing to fly. So once we change it, like to a work contract, a very basic work contract, as basic as it gets, this guy got approved, right? So from that moment on, we do not present company paperwork. It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, it's just like a joke. But let's say if the owner, if Elon Musk, right, presents Tesla's incorporation papers to the Brazil immigration would decline an application from Elon Musk. Elon Musk would need a contract between Tesla as an employer and himself as an employee, right? Or it could be a freelancer, it could be like a contractor, but they are pretty settled on this type of paperwork. They do not accept company formation papers, right? Even if you show eventually, right, like paperwork supporting that you're being paid by the company, they are not accepting this paperwork, okay? So that's a very interesting perspective of the digital nomad, particularly if you own a business entity. Terry Roswell, thanks, Luciano. Well done. I will be in touch for a consultation when the time comes within 30 days of my intended arrival. Thanks again. You're pretty welcome, Terry. Depending on your plans, you may want to start the process a little bit earlier. Because like if you need to legalize documents, right? For instance, birth certificate, there is a bunch of steps that you need to do upfront, not with 30 days. So maybe 60 days, 90 days, I think you would be a little bit safer. But of course, it's your choice of when getting started, and when the right time comes for you, we're going to be here to assist you. All right, we are almost done for today. We have a few minutes. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question today, we're going to have another live stream on Sunday. It's going to be at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Again, we're talking about Sunday, January the 7th at 3:30 as our next live streaming date. And then after that, we're going to have another one on Wednesday, January the 10th, which again, it's going to be day when the waiver for U.S. citizens, Canadian citizens, and Australian citizens is revoked by President Lula. And then you guys going to need visas even to visit Brazil for 10 days if you want. There is no more waiver. You need a visa. The good news, again, is that it's super easy to apply for the visa. It's an e-visa. You can literally do it in 30 minutes, okay? So if you are good with computers, if you are good with completing, it's just $82 you're going to need to pay to get the visa. And it's a requirement after January the 9th. It's going to be enforced on January the 10th onwards. So January the 10th, it kicks in the requirement. If you show up at American Airlines and you don't have a visa, guess what? They are not going to let you board, okay? So make sure to keep this information in mind, like for anyone who's not traveling this week, you're going to need a visa to enter Brazil, right? Well, I hope this, this session was helpful. It was a pleasure. We had many participants today, really good questions. I love when I get questions from our participants. It's much more dynamic than getting our offline questions to discuss with you. So if you have additional questions, keep a log so we can discuss in our next live stream, which is going to be on Sunday, January the 7th. All right. Thank you for participating. You guys